Ray Catterley here with Allan Dyer in Medina, Texas, right between Medina and Utopia. But don't try to find it on the map because you're not going to. This is one of the most peaceful, serene retreats that I've experienced. And there's other videos where there's an off-grid cabin that Allan built. Check and see those. There's some things that Allan and I both enjoy about environmental stewardship, and he's demonstrating those real time in that building. But this is the main house. And so tell us first how you got into building with hemp and your short journey into this arena, and then how that ended up being the house that you're building behind us.
I'm not really sure exactly when, but maybe 15 or 20 years ago, I saw some hemp houses. I think it was in Europe and stuff like this. And I think it was slowly starting here in the States. And then, but it was too expensive and you had to get everything from Europe. So I kind of blew that off, and then we got closer and closer to wanting to build our house. Then COVID hit, slowed us down, and then I started looking at it again because I was either going to do rammed earth or compressed brick, something, you know, some kind of natural stuff. And then I looked at hemp again and realized that, wow, that was affordable. And then Gene had that class going on, the Hemp Pro class, and I said, wow, that's pretty neat. And so I decided to take the class, get all on board.
And we were excited to have you come through the class, and it's a thrill to have you come through the class and now be standing in front of your project. And so what we'll do is just go through and look at some of the details one by one, because you've got some really neat details. This is a unique home that's custom tailored for you and your preferences, and you had some really good innovations along the way. Let's start with the windows here and how you had your window buck, and how I know this is one of the things that I wish I would have done, to where you can come from the top down and then tamp the hemp in. But tell us about this whole assembly, and especially on your on this taper that you've got.
Well, I can't really remember exactly how we came up with the idea, but I think maybe it was a guy in Graham in England who had talked to us. We were doing some consulting with him on build and stuff, and he had suggested to do this, and I think he showed us some pictures of some of his builds. And so we thought, wow, that would be great, because at the beginning I was going to have my windows on the outside flush, and he said, no, you really need to go in a little bit and take advantage of that, and then slope it out like this, and then that way you get good water runoff, and you can show it off a little bit better. And then there's a lot of, and that's the one thing I want people to know, is you've got a lot of options on windows. See, I was a little bit more pragmatic. I came all the way out. I had a piece of trim. I could take the trim off, take the window out, put a new one. I built it more for being the maintenance side instead of the design side. But you can have some beautiful barrel rolls, have them die into the window, trim them out. There's a lot of different options on windows, and you can really incorporate the beauty of the natural material in with other media. And then so you can come see down here, make sure that we get this detail to where you've got the window buck right here, but then right along the bottom, this is where it'll be your fastener for the window in the center. And so you can have the window flush to the outside, flush to the inside, somewhere in between. And it looks like you got them marked off a little bit there for us as well. Show us over here along the foundation to where you've got a piece of this flashing, and then one of the things that happens in the Hempcrete, to where this is a vapor open wall, and then moisture can go in if it ever makes its way down, and then also you don't want it making its way up. Tell us about this assembly and how you incorporated that. Well, we we're going to have clay floors, and so it's not like we have a concrete slab for our foundation. So we poured these beams all around, to hold the walls up. And I knew we were going to have about 3 1/4 inches of hemp on the outside of the framing, and I was trying to figure out some way to make sure the water came out and like you said, didn't come up. And so I thought, well, Z flashing sounds like it'd be a great idea. And so we were able to get the Metal Mart to make us the flashing that also is the same color as our roof. So it kind of ties in pretty nicely.
Yeah, those are
And
nice details to where the color of one blends in with the other. But this is something I wanted folks to be able to take a look at the end of it. This is just something that you can go, and if you know the angles and what you want to accomplish, then you can go, because I looked, it's like, oh, now I'm going to need to buy a bender just for the convenience. But no, it is very affordable to have the metal shop bend this for you, and then it's something that you can have your window details, foundation details. It's something that's not that expensive. So go ahead and make sure that you accomplish the unique things that you need to do. But don't be afraid to have that metal bent, but just know what you're
right.
Know what you're asking for.
That was like $2 a foot, or
Yeah.
a little bit less.
Yeah, yeah. And then now over here underneath it, you were telling about and you can see when we're coming in, we're not coming into a slab foundation. And over here you can see some of these beams where you just poured beams. But then tell us about the weather barrier that you had underneath that flashing that we just had. Tell us about the paint decision and the options that you looked at for that.
Well, our concrete guy is a really nice guy, inexpensive. I really like him, but he did not pour it square. So when the framers came out is when we found out that it wasn't square, and we had a bunch of vapor barrier mats and stuff that we were going to put down on top of the concrete slabs or the beams, and then put the walls on top. But since they didn't know where the walls were going to be, I had to real quickly come up with something, and so I had some elastomeric paint in the barn, and so I came out here real quickly and put 2 coats on while 12 people were waiting for me. So it was
now.
Yeah, so it was their lunchtime. So basically it was lunchtime, and then it dries pretty fast because it was I think it was August, so it dried pretty quickly, and so that way they were able to put the walls on the beams and move them around without tearing up the paper and stuff like this that would have been down there. And it's not the most environmentally friendly thing, but neither is tar paper. So
yeah,
it's a necessary evil. And we didn't use any treated lumber, in the house, and so we were trying to do our best.
Yeah, and so stopping the migration of that moisture is of the utmost importance, especially if you're not using that green wood like what's typically called for. Now, I know these beams are something that I want to make mention of, and then I know on Keith's project that was there in Georgia where he had the blocks, they had those built up, and then it was like about 2 foot clearance, so you could just like have a nice working height.
Oh, yeah.
And then they filled in everything else, which has challenges of its own as well. So they kind of formed up instead of trenching down. But one of the points that he made, which made me think of him here, is that if you've got a beam that's crooked and you need to kind of cheat in or cheat out like that, well, now you've still got a square, plumb, and true wall, even though the rough foundation is a little bit off. You can fix it, and then now your walls are just straight as can be, and then off and rolling. So let's talk about this detail for bracing, because I know one of the big things is a lot of times the sheathing that's applied to the outside is there for your bracing and your shear loads. But then if you don't have that sheathing, which saves wood consumption, then you need to brace with something. And so there's a couple of options for lead-in bracing. And then you went with these ties here. Tell us about that, and then how those go in and some of the decisions and the application on that.
Well, the Simpson ties, seemed like they were the easiest thing to install and, get the most distance out of them. And I was at a conference in October, and they had mentioned them that they were, pretty decent. And so I bought all the ones they had at the store, and so this is all I had. And so, and they're real easy to install. So all you have to do is just get a saw, run a line, and then basically nail them in.
Yeah, so they're cut into the wood, and then you can pan around and see how they're just all over. And then one of the things that I like about them is they're a little bit smaller. So if we come back over and see how you're working around this work zone right here, This is something to where you can get your tamping equipment back in here. This is a hand cast application. Even if you're spraying it, some of those boards, we used 2x6s on a project, and even that was getting us out a little bit to where it created some other narrow crevices that were harder to get the correct tamping in. So this it's not a space hog, but it does do the job, and it's something that, you know, this is something easy to pick up with a pickup, and you got all that you need, and so that's a nice detail. But it's something that an architect or an engineer is not going to typically go for, and you need to know to ask them for that. And then now this is a little bit more old school, because now everybody uses the sheathing, and then that might be mandatory in some areas for seismic areas. So you'll want to get with your professionals on the architect and the engineering side in your design phase to make sure that this is even an option for you if there's not any other requirement that needs to be met, especially in seismic area zones. Now on this same wall, here's a pro tip. This is called the hungry wall. And I heard it called the hungry wall, and I was like, what is a hungry wall? And it's just a big open wall to where when it's almost lunchtime and you got 3/4 of a batch made of the hempcrete, everybody's hungry, you want to get rid of that material fast. Now some of these areas where you're hand casting that in, it's very tedious, and then you know, you have to work real slow. Well now it's lunchtime, or if your batch is starting to dry out, you need a place that you can just rip and roll. Now, Allan, tell us why else you have this wall set aside, and what's going to be going on here tomorrow.
Well, we wanted to have an easy wall because we have about 10 people showing up, some different architects and designers, and some friends of ours that are eco-friendly, and they want to come out and take a look at it and participate some. And so we decided we'd do this wall. It'd be the easiest wall to do, you know, as far as loading, and they won't be getting up on top of scaffolding or on ladders and so forth.
But these aren't the teenagers that are coming out tomorrow.
No, they're in, yeah, they probably don't want me to say how old they are, but they've been there. They were at Woodstock, let's put it that way.
They would benefit from an ergonomically pleasing wall.
Correct.
And so I thought that was one of the most thoughtful and kind things to do. You know, a construction project can be just cold-hearted. You need to get it done and then don't cry about it and stuff like that. But you went out of your way, because this is one of your purposes in building with this material and building with all the systems that you do, is to show and tell sustainability, off-grid feasibility, all the, I mean, from the land management that you have to the buildings that you build. I just loved seeing that, and how that education effort is something that's there, but then being considerate about who's coming, that spoke volumes to me. So that pro tip on a hungry wall, but also the ergonomically friendly wall for when you have guests out, and I'm sure it's going to make for a good photo op.
Yeah, it should.
Now, Allan, this is one of the coolest rooms I've seen, and you're the cook, and a good one at that, and this is right off the kitchen. Tell us what this room is for.
It's our root cellar, and we tried to get it embedded in the hill, but it didn't quite work out that way. But anyway, it's close. But it's well insulated, rock on the outside and inside, and then the barrel ceiling is something that I really wanted to do, and it was a challenge, but Pablo and I made some trusses, and they worked out pretty well.
Yeah, so all of these projects, as they're going through, you got to figure out and do site decisions and fabricate things and come up with it. Tell us about, you said you've made the trusses. Tell us about the wood selection. I think you had looked, did you look at plaster on this and then come in with the wood, and then what did you treat that with as well?
Well, we were going to do stone, and then that was just way out of my bailiwick. I just didn't have enough confidence in doing the stone barreled ceiling, and so that's when we decided to go ahead and make the trusses. And then we came in, and this is beaded ceiling, a D-grade, so it shows a lot of knots and things like this. Mm-hmm. And then we pre-treat the pine with tung oil and citrus oil about 2 or 3 coats, and then the last coat we put on is what they call dark tung oil, which has kind of a stain in it. And it doesn't make it too dark, but it makes it look aged. And so the 3 coats on there should be a permanent fix. You know, we shouldn't have to ever do anything to the ceiling again.
And this could be a winery in the Tuscan Valley in Italy. This is a beautiful detail with the dark and the light.
Yeah, the hope is the temperatures stay pretty cool in here, because I'll be storing most of my vegetables and fruits and canning stuff in here.
And then so let's keep rolling and go towards the outside, and you can see the thickness of this wall. Talk about the detail about this wall profile and how you came in with block, because you've got the wood frame house, but then along here you came in and then just clad this on the inside and outside with stone. Talk us through this detail right here.
Well, the architect that we hired to do the drawing, because we needed a drawing that we could send to the framers and the concrete person so we could get bids instead of us doing the drawing ourselves. And so he spec'd it all out, and he really wanted us to build a concrete wall on the back of the building because of being in the hillside. And so instead of a concrete wall, which was too expensive, we went with block and filled it with concrete. And so that was basically the same thing. And then we put the rock on the outside of the block. And so like here's where we'll have our door jamb for the door, and then it'll swing in to the building there. And then we put the lintel up there ahead of time.
That's one big.
It was really heavy.
That's everybody here for that one.
Yeah, it took the Bobcat to get it up there.
Now tell us about, we've come from the root cellar, storing all the canned goods, things like that, the preserves that you put up, and then now we're coming on the outside, and this is going to be the kitchen area out in this open space. But tell us about how you prep this to where your cabinets can just die into here and have a nice transition.
So these outside beams are 18 inches wide and about 3 to 3.5 feet deep. And so we have the 8-inch block on the other side, all the way both directions. I think in this area it's around 82 inches tall, and then as it goes that direction it's about 50 inches tall. And so to hold the rock up, we put in a 4-inch block here where our cabinets are going to go, and then we had the rock come out about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch, so when we build our cabinets and put the cabinets in and put the countertop on, it'll dive into here, so it'll look like the rock is on top of the countertop, but without any pressure of the rock. And so it just seemed like it was a neat deal. And that actually wasn't my idea; it was my rock mason came up with that. And so I thought, wow, that's pretty neat.
Yeah, a lot of the different trades that are on a job site will give you ideas and things to think about that are unique to Hempcrete in the natural building process, like the framers and all the details on how they finish things out, the rock mason, how they finish things out from the block to the stone. And I know that's one thing that people like, is that old world look, that natural look, and then the plasters, especially when you have the pigments in them, you've got that beautiful kind of embellished leathery look that's out there, that you got some nice colors, but when you get a natural stone and you want to incorporate that in there, then that's one thing that you'll need to do. So you've got your thick walls here. This is the chef's pantry. Tell us about this room and how things transition and how they're going to go over here in this area as well.
So we wanted the kitchen to be like old European look. So we didn't want a lot of appliances inside the main kitchen area. We'll just have the stove and a center island here. And so our refrigerator, freezer, ice maker, all of our coffee, all of the appliances will be in here. And so this will be just a space that's out of the way. And then we'll have shelves and cabinets up on top. Since they're 10-foot ceilings, we have a lot of space.
And so you've got the thick walls in your main area here in this big living area. How thick are your interior walls?
Where we have hemp on the interior walls are 8 inches, and then the exterior walls are 12, and then this main building here we have, since they're 20 foot tall, we went with 12 inches.
Yeah, and so that's that's very robust. And you know, you start to realize, hey, there's a lot of space that gets tied up in that thick of a wall, but this will give you a lot of, it'll act a lot like a battery for you and hold that temperature how you want it at that constant level on there. So this is going to be nice.
Yeah, because we really don't like using air conditioning, so we'll have 4 mini splits in case it does get hot.
Now, on that note, talk about the windows that you did. I know sometimes you can lose some efficiency, sometimes you can gain some efficiency, but this is a little bit of both, and it's just, you're going to have beauty for days out here, and then the light in here is going to be wonderful, but it'll also be something to where these are all functioning, correct?
Correct. They're awning windows and they're functioning, and the idea is that as the wind moves across the roof, it will pull air through these windows and then pull the air from the bottom up. And so it'll be a natural ventilation, and you know, unless it's just really, really hot, it should be nice.
Yeah, and so just letting the hot air escape. It's kind of like an old school attic fan.
Correct. And then all of our windows are all designed like our exterior wall windows are all casement windows, and we have them opening to get the predominant wind and so forth. And so that way it'll drive the air into the house and then move it up. And so it should, you know, that's the theory. Yeah.
Well, I want to point out these transitions over here. Now, you're finishing up with the micropause that's being used here, and then these are the 3 different layers that you see, and we've been in communication all while the supply chains have been maturing.
Correct.
And so that's one of the things that we like. Tell us about why we have the 3 different colors.
Well, down here is Hess, and I couldn't find any more Hess, and so micropause, this is the ready mix micropause, and you had some of this, and so I was able to obtain this. And then later I was able to get the catalyst, which is what the ingredient is inside this micropause. I guess that's called micropause also, or?
The micropause catalyst, yeah. Catalyst. And so you can see the different colorations, and then I really enjoyed it because it's not every day you get to work all 3 different options like that and then get a good feel for it in production, not just mixing up a small batch to test it, but they've all been doing very well and performing. And this is all going to be covered over with plaster, so it's not like you're making a flag in the wall.
Correct. Yeah. And so the Hess, you know, we mix lime, the binder, and a hemp. This comes all in one bag, so you just mix the bag with the hemp, and then the top one is similar to the Hess down here, and that's the catalyst. And so you just mix the catalyst, the hemp, and the lime, and bingo.
Yeah, and on both the catalyst and the Hess, that's a pozzolan additive to where you're able to use local lime, local to this region, and then that's a very bright white color. And then this is what was imported, all put together, and so you can see the difference. And then I think that white lime is what brings out that color.
This is real nice for if you have a small project, because it's all in one bag, so there's no measuring, nothing. You just dump it and go. Yeah. Whereas these other ones require a little bit of knowledge, and your mixer needs to be the same person, so that way your batches come out the way they're supposed to.
Yeah. And so depending on your project and what size you've got, are you going to have different people doing the mix all the time? And it's very wise to put the same, maybe 1 or 2 people on it. And then I like how Carl even had somebody make a ball each and every batch. One, so you'd know how many batches you're going through, but you'd also know the different consistency of those. So talk about this joint right here and what y'all were doing. This is a little bit of belt and suspenders on here, but I liked it.
Well, micropause, this ready mix dries extremely fast, so you have to be pretty quick at putting it in the wall. And then the next day, since it does dry very quickly, I didn't want it to have any kind of a break. And so what we did is we painted a solution of lime in between or on top of this before we put the next batch on top of it. Just so that way
and it'll make that bond between the 2.
Correct. Similar to mortar, but it's just, you know, it's like moisture. People have different ways of doing it, and I just figured, well, you know, lime would make it, you know, a little better, and I sleep better at night.
Yeah, and so you'd have the form up, and then you would have like half of it filled, time to go to bed, finish out the day, and then you finish filling the rest of the way. Now, sometimes you come back to it the next day, and then, you know, just wetting it is what's preferred. And then if you have to go 1, 2, 3, 4 days, and then you come back to this, well, now this is something that's, like I said, it's belt and suspenders, but I really like it, mixing up that lime wash, about the consistency of a watered down Elmer's glue, and just painting that on. And then that gave it that bond that's there, that's nice and strong and robust to make it everything that it can be. Talk about your formwork.
Well, there's 100 different ways of doing forms.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, you can spend all the money you want on pre-made forms, but for us, I just bought a bunch of plywood, and we just kind of make the forms up as we go. We try to keep them at 2-foot and 8-foot lengths, and then we start chopping them up as we hit the you know,
Getting
different
in the
walls.
tight spots.
Because you know, some builds are more walled and no windows, but this house has a lot of windows and a lot of walls, and so it's maddening. You know,
And you can see over here where you're able to leapfrog instead of taking one off and then coming up. If you're able to have two and then leapfrog one over the other, and then you can work your way up to the top, then that's one of those advantages. And you can see how the 2x material gets you the rigidity, so your plywood doesn't become wavy gravy as the project goes on.
Correct. Yeah, it's you know, it takes a lot of work, and so we also have just 2 people doing most of the form work. That way, it's consistent, and then you know, we can point fingers.
You can, yeah.
And so that's, you know, it's not so much pointing fingers, it's just more of just saying, hey, you know, we got, this is not, we don't want to do it like this again.
Yeah, and that's a good thing to know on crews. As you know, if you're putting together a crew, have the handful of people that do this. And then it's best to have one person that owns that task. You know, they can cross-train into a lot of other things, but as far as whether it's mixing, whether it's forms, whether it's this, whatever it is, one person owns it. And then they'll make sure that everybody else does it right, instead of anybody could, nobody did, everybody should type of scenario.
Right.
Well, let's go on around and take a look at your windows. Getting into golden hour, so you can take all your selfies for. Tell us about this wall and the trussing that you put and the bracing that you put in here. Now, I've got some other pictures, and so we'll include that for you on the video so everybody can see. But tell us how you kept this in here, because you've got a lot of space. There's not a lot of room to run the Simpson strong ties like what you were talking about. Tell us what you did here.
So here, I'm not sure the terminology, but we did a lattice type cross bracing. So on all of our corners and in between some of the windows, we did cross bracing all the way up, lattice all the way up to the top. And that's just to kind of keep it good and square, because since we have a lot of windows, you know, it's pretty important to have everything square, because you know, they're not going to work very well if it's not.
Yeah, so you got a wall of windows, and if you don't have that sheathing and you don't have the ability to go that angle brace, it's nice to have that strong wall in there with that into it. And then so we'll put some of the pictures for you on the video to where you can see what we've got. And then you can just see how the different, we talked about this a little earlier, about how the different materials are coming together. All this is nice. The supply chains are maturing nicely, so and then that's one of the things that are coming on to where you can just run with one material. Once you get used to it, you can go with it. Take a nice slow pan all the way up here at the top about how these details are coming in. That is the effort of a good form crew and good hempcrete installation coming together. Tell us about what you're going to do up in the rafters.
Well, we're going to put some old fencing like we did at the cabin for our soffits, and that'll have, you know, small holes, and so that should be able to vent, you know, the roof. or inside, and then we'll have beaded ceilings all throughout the house itself. And yeah, and it's a real challenge. One of the things of putting a roof on before you do the hemp is because when you get real tight up there at the top, you don't have anywhere, you don't have a lot of space. And as you go in, your trusses are up higher, so you have a lot more space to hemp at the top. And so a lot of people will hemp a wall and not have a roof on it. But for me, with the rain and the sun and everything else, I just felt like yeah, it's going to be a little harder, but I think this is safer. I don't have
It's
to
a
worry.
fair trade. Yeah,
It's a trade-off.
I've been on projects where it's both ways, and then you're hating life up at the top, but then everything's protected. So it is a fair trade.
Well, last week it was drizzling every day, and so we were able to work easily inside because we had all this, and then the gutters were pretty important to keep the splash down away from the house.
Yeah, and you've got some wonderful eaves that I always like to point that out in every project, and I always like to encourage that. What do you have, like over 2 feet?
Yeah, it's 40 inches.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
You got, that's a lot of eaves on there.
Yeah, well, the architect wasn't real happy with me because he was really wanting me to put a lot more bracing up there, but I said, nah, this will work because it's part of the trusses, and so it's carrying the load all the way in, and so it shouldn't have much of a problem. And then, of course, we put hurricane straps and everything else to hold the trusses down.
Yeah, those eaves take so much burden off of the surfaces and off of the windows, and so that lifetime of performance, one, you probably get a little bit of shade on that window while still letting in light, depending on the arc of your the path of the sun for you. But it's one of those things that that window could have problems in performing, and you could still put off replacing your windows for quite a while if you're not asking it to shed all of the rain.
Correct.
Yeah. So you opted for the clay floors. Tell us why and how, because they're a beautiful look, they're a beautiful feel, but you got to know what you're doing. Tell us about that process and how you're doing it in here.
Well, we really like the connection of earth, and so having a clay floor just makes sense. And it's a softer floor, it's easier on your joints, and it's all natural, and you get a lot of positive feelings from it. We will have some stone in some of our real wet areas or high traffic areas, but all the bedrooms and the office and this living room will be clay floor. And we've never done a clay floor. We did one up at the cabin. It didn't work out so well, so we're going to hire that out. But what we did do is we left about a 5-inch space. So I came in with this.
So here's the edge of your lip, so it's going to come up to here.
Correct.
And then you've already got your gravel that'll go under it as your aggregate.
Correct.
And then you will or will not have a vapor barrier?
We will not have a vapor barrier. We've done some radon testing, and so far we haven't. It's hit or miss. And we can't do anything in here because it's vented too much. But in our house, our cabin that we're living in right now, we've been doing radon testing for the last 6 months.
And depending on where you are in the country, you'll either have tons of radon where you have to vent that out, but you can have it tested. Now, this is the Texas Hill Country. There's not a lot to speak of out here, and so it's not even commonly known about in real estate and in building, but it is something to know about. If you're doing this in some different part of the world, you want to test that because you're not creating a barrier. And one of the things that there's another project out in Dripping Springs where they want the grounding. The health benefits to being grounded are phenomenal. And then the other thing is that you're in the Texas Hill Country. You can almost start building on the ground. It's so stable out here, whereas on the other side of I-35, you've got expansive clay soils that are always moving, and you could put a car on and just watch it eat it over the years.
Correct.
And so there's a lot of things to consider. Now tell us how that'll go on though.
Well, there's several different layers, but the clay itself is only maybe 1.5 inches or 2 inches thick. And they'll come in with the aggregate, they'll pack it, and then they'll just slowly start getting finer and finer until the very last. Different people have different techniques, but between 3/8 of an inch, 1/2 inch of fine clay on top of the base clay. So the sand's going to get smaller and smaller, and then they'll trowel that on, and then they'll put in. We'll be doing all the oil work, because they oil and then wax it later. That helps it kind of keep it hydrated and keep it from moving and cracking.
And that's a much more environmentally friendly material to produce, one. It's more pleasant as far as a living space, too. And I really like how you've incorporated not just hemp as a key innovation, but all the different, the tung oils, the linseed oils, all those things that if we pay attention and listen, we can learn a lot. And then this is how that comes to fruition in a project. And so these clay floors, I think, are going to be really
Well, and the
nice
clay
for
came
that.
from this site. From this right here, it's amazing out here that we have clay, but we have a lot of red clay.
Yeah, and the color, like on the cabin walls and the project up at the top of the hill, that was just beautiful.
Yeah, it turned out really, really nice. I liked it.
Yeah, it's not every Texas Hill Country enclave that you find a pocket of clay.
No, no, and yeah, so it was nice, and so we've saved every bit that we could save.
Yeah, and that's, I've talked to a lot of folks who want to grow their own house. They want to plant the hemp and then harvest the hemp, and it adds a lot of layers and a lot of time, and then, but it's a very romantic idea. And then what more of a romantic idea of using materials from your own property to make a home. I love that.
Well, we're going to hopefully make all of our doors and all of our cabinets from wood from the property. So that'll be exciting and time consuming.
Yeah, the cabinets that you've got in the existing house are just beautiful. And then I like how you put the other cedar, just the exposed live edge, and milled it down a little bit. You've got some work cut out for you on that, but I think you definitely know your way around the sawmill.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun, especially when you get to look at it later and know that you did it and it came from your property, and it was natural fall, so we didn't cut any of the trees down. They were all dead.
Well, this is going to be coming to fruition, and then everything is nice to see completion. You got it on the run. You can see the finish now. The last little bit seems to take forever, but this is going to be a wonderful project. We'll try to come back out when you're doing the plaster phase, so everybody can kind of see how the plaster comes back in, and you incorporate that. And then that is one of the things that you need to incorporate in your spacing decisions about how thick things are, what kind of reveals you have, and accommodating for the plaster. So we'll try to make it out then. But for now, Allan, man, I can't tell you what a wonderful time it's been. You're a fantastic host, and this design is just amazing.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it.
Thanks a bunch.